Welcome back to SNC Tonight. As we just covered a little bit, Israel's war with the Palestinians continues to rage. The dead continue to pile up. And the question, I think, on most people's minds is why? Why did this happen? What led up to this conflict? Why do the Palestinians hate Israel so much? And what does Iran have to do with this? Well, here's to talk to us about that is Lisa Daftari. She's the editor-in-chief over at the Foreign Desk. And Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. Really appreciate it.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Let's start with the base level. What is going on right now? So we obviously heard over the weekend the Palestinians attacked Israel. It was something that was completely unexpected. It seems like the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, was completely unprepared from this. What the hell happened?
Yeah, this is unprecedented on so many different levels. Obviously, we all know about Israel's robust intelligence apparatuses, right? They're able to detect the smallest of terror plots across the world and help out in many ways to the United States and many others with their intelligence capabilities, because they have no choice but to always be on guard and to watch their surrounding neighborhood. And in this case, what happened? How was it that they were able to get them when they were the most vulnerable? It's on the Sabbath, on the high holy days of Simchat Torah, the end of Sukkot. Catching people early on a Saturday morning, they hear sirens, they go down into their safe houses, and they wait. And later, they find out this was a multi-pronged attack. 1,000 militants come into the country by foot in multiple entryways. There was air, sea, land invasion. How did Israel not catch this, right? And we're watching as the bodies pile up, as you said. This was traditional warfare in the sense that it was an actual attack. That's why they're calling it a war. Bibi Netanyahu declared it a war. But it is also grotesque, and it is very much like ISIS that we saw in 2014. Beheadings, setting old people on fire. Yeah. Executing entire families, going into homes, pulling little kids out of the rooms where they were hiding in fear and killing them all. I mean, bodies piled up. And, you know, I've said on many different interviews, I think horror films will have something to now live up to, because this was worse than horror films that we've ever seen, worse than any terror films and things that we're watching, you know, in terms of entertainment. It is horrific, grotesque, and unfortunately being celebrated by Palestinians back in Gaza, handing out sweets, parades of bloodied bodies, and a woman bleeding from her crotch area because she was raped so badly, being dragged through the streets of Gaza, people clapping, cheering, and passing out sweets.
I think that that's the thing that frightens me the most, is that support that both the Palestinians have for what is happening in Israel right now. But then there's also, we even spoke about this during our first segment today, this celebration from the West. Because you almost see like there's this idea that the Palestinians are this oppressed minority that, you know, is fighting back a just war against the Israelis. My question for you then is, where does that narrative come from? Is there any, I guess, because a lot of people will say that this is a two thing, it's both the Israelis and the Palestinians. Where does the truth lie on that?
Right. So in this case, you can have any opinion you want about Palestinians and Israelis, and you can be pro-Palestinian, you can be pro-Israeli, you can be neutral. This is a moral issue. What is happening, this attack, this massacre, it's evil. It's evil. You can be pro-Palestinian and care about the future of the Palestinians. In fact, if you do care about the future of the Palestinians, you should be calling out Hamas. Because actually the first victims of Hamas are the Palestinians, who they lead. Because look at all the money that they're spending on this war, all these weapons, everything that they're using. Use that money to glorify, beautify Gaza. Give your constituents a better life. Give them security. Give them a good education, instead of brainwashing these young kids into believing that every day they have to go out and kill Jews. That if they blow themselves up in the name of killing Jews, that they will become martyrs and they're going to go to heaven. Stop doing this and call them out. And for the West to be sanitizing this narrative, to be saying that they are hurt and this was inevitable, that is just bogus. This is pure terrorism. It's pure terrorism. There's no way that this could be. Listen, the Iran regime is saying we did this. Hamas is saying we want Jews dead. But the West, they translate that into they're freedom fighters and they're hurt. And they have blockades and they are fighting for human rights. No, they are not. They want Jews dead, and they are very clear about it. But somehow it gets translated very differently in the mainstream media and here in the West, unfortunately.
I think that you're totally right. Obviously, we saw protests and demonstrations in New York. We saw protests and demonstrations in London of people supporting what is happening, supporting the Palestinian response to whatever, just going into Israel and slaughtering people en masse. Another thing you just mentioned that I think is really important to note, Iran. Iran is involved in this process. Iran is involved in what is happening in Israel. Lisa, in what context is Iran involved in all of this?
Right. So we've known that Iran has been, writing the checks to Hamas for a very long time, and they have multiple terror proxies throughout the region: Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Houthis in Yemen, and a couple actually, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and others in the Palestinian territories. But we've never seen an attack of this sophistication and complexity, and that is because Iran was not only writing the checks in this case, but also involved in planning. And we've been saying this all weekend since this war broke out. But last night there was a breaking report by the Wall Street Journal that actually outlined the timeline with which the Hamas and other groups, again, this was a concerted effort, it wasn't just Hamas, terror organizations that traveled to Beirut to meet with Iran's regime in order to orchestrate this, get the green light, get the funding, get the training, get all these strategy tactics down, and then come back and launch this attack. So again, Iran showing off that they were behind this. They're proud of being behind this, but the West, again, denying Iran's connection to all of this because they want to distance themselves from their own responsibility. The White House emboldened Iran to do this, and I will outline why that is. Whether or not, I know there's a big debate on social media over the weekend as to whether or not the $6 billion that the United States unfroze to Iran as a part of the prisoner exchange went to fund this war, this massacre against Israel. Well, let's say it doesn't have to. Why? Because when you know $6 billion is coming into your savings account, you're very generous about your checking account because you know more money is coming in. It might have been Iran's last installment to Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or it might have been the aid that the Biden administration reinstated to the Palestinians, the same aid that Donald Trump cut off. Right. Why? Because we were concerned it was going towards terrorism. Right. And that's exactly what we're watching here. A lot of money, a lot of sophistication, a lot of weapons, and all raining down on Israel and Israelis.
I think that that's so well taken, too, because, again, regardless of whether or not the money went to Iran or, they got it yet, it's still that idea that you have a $6 billion surplus now to do whatever you want with it seems pretty connected.
Also, Doug, I will add, emboldening in terms of that political posturing, right? What has been the White House's policy for the last 3 years? Please strike a deal with us. We'll come back to the negotiating table multiple times to make it happen. These sanctions, let's move these pesky sanctions out of the way. Iran's regime has had $80 billion, I believe, and don't quote me on that, but around that ballpark of a very large number, extra revenue because of these sanctions being removed. We have allowed them. We've moved out of their way, and the United States has emboldened them to have a better positioning, even though Iranian people are out on the streets protesting. They're telling the West, we don't want this government. We want regime change, but we have ignored them. We've removed the challenges. We've removed the obstacles. We've removed the sanctions, and we have told them that we want a deal. So what message does that give to Iran's regime? They're free to do whatever they want, and this was the opportune time. The Israelis were vulnerable. Holiday weekend. A lot of domestic issues going on inside Israel, so the left and right are at each other's throats. So a great time to get them while they're down. And with Iran's help, that's exactly what
Lisa, final question. This is going to be a doozy, so I'm going to make it brief. What are Israel's chances in this? Do we anticipate that Israel will be able to fight back effectively against this coordinated effort from Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, all of these terrorist groups, or do we anticipate there will be issues?
Absolutely. I have no doubt that Israel will be able to do what it needs to do. Look, Israel's always playing defense, right? They're never going into Gaza and playing offense and launching these types of attacks. But now, obviously, this is retaliation. This is defense. They need to go in there. They do give warnings as opposed to Hamas, which actually targeted civilian areas, actually targeted families, actually went after toddlers. Israel does give warnings to evacuate civilian areas. They are trying to target headquarters of Hamas. They already took down one Hamas building. There have been casualties, of course. That is the side effect of war. You can't just be out there watching dead Israeli bodies and having candy one day and not expect Israeli tanks to roll in the next. So this is what we're watching.
I will say, too, as well, the Israelis warn the Palestinians to get out, and then the Palestinian Authority and Hamas tell them, ignore them, they're trying to lie to you, and then guess what happens?
That death toll is part of the PR.
Absolutely.
I will tell you.
It's all a PR campaign.
We've been watching this for way too many years. This is just a pattern.
Absolutely. Lisa Daftari, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Check out her reporting over at the Foreign Desk. It's some really good stuff.
Thank you.
All right. Well, stick around here. SNC Tonight continues next.